I'm not guilty.
At 7 a.m. on January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy died as a result of execution in the electric chair at a Florida state prison for numerous crimes, including brutal rapes and murders from 1974 to 1978. During that time, Ted Bundy killed approximately 36 people. When he was finally apprehended, the entire country wanted to witness Bundy's death. People's desire was fulfilled and Ted Bundy was executed. But that's not the whole story. Is it true that Ted Bundy could have avoided execution? Could he have been acquitted at some point after his conviction? Why wasn't the prosecution convinced of its evidence and rushed to make a deal with Bundy? And finally, why, despite all this, did Theodore decide to reject these opportunities, thereby dooming himself to death? We will try to answer these questions in this video. The execution and death of Ted Bundy became a national event for spectators, outside prison gates and millions of viewers watching TV at home. Burn Bundy, burn! Adorned protest signs. The whole world watched, eager to witness Ted Bundy's death. As soon as it became clear that he had brutally killed dozens of people, one of them 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, the public's desire to see him fried reached its peak. Ted Bundy's relationship with Elizabeth Klopfer, his brutal murders, and his widely publicized trial were meticulously scrutinized in the media. After he was apprehended, Ted Bundy confessed his horrific deeds to his girlfriend over the phone. "The force just consumes me," he told her. "It's like one night I was walking by the campus and followed this girl from the sorority. I didn't want to follow her. I didn't do anything except follow her. And that's how it was. I would go out late at night and follow these people. I would try not to do it, but I would still do it." This activity soon led to years-long killing sprees in multiple states. Yet Bundy nonetheless repeatedly evaded justice, including a successful escape from a Colorado prison and subsequent escape to Florida in 1977. It was his second escape that year earlier. He had jumped out of a courthouse window and remained at large for 6 days. It was Bundy's time in Florida that perhaps drove the final nail into his infamous coffin. On January 15, 1978, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University, killing 2 young women and injuring 2 others. After this horrific attack, there was only one victim left before he was caught. Approximately 3 weeks after the terror on the Tallahassee campus, Bundy abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from a school in Lake City, Florida. He killed the girl and dumped her body in the Sewanee State Park. In February 1978, he was apprehended by a Pensacola police officer who found Bundy's car too suspicious. Not only did the car have stolen plates, but Bundy also presented the officer with stolen driver's licenses. So, after years of killings, Ted Bundy was caught. He confessed his true identity after 2 days in custody. The man who was on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list and sought by law enforcement for questioning in over 30 murders is now under arrest. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. When he called Elizabeth Klopfer shortly after his arrest in Florida, he was in tears. According to her memoirs, he desperately didn't take responsibility for his actions. Reporters found that Ted Bundy lived in the Oaks residential complex, an affordable housing complex several blocks away from the Chi Omega sorority house. A documented report from one of its members, Nita Neary, who saw a man descending the stairs that night, was used during Bundy's trial. She was able to give a good positive identification, said lead prosecutor Larry Simpson. Nita Neary actually met with a sketch artist and drew a composite of the man she saw leaving the Chi Omega house. He looked like Mr. Bundy. It was not just a fleeting resemblance based on eyewitness accounts that influenced the court in favor of the prosecution. For example, Bundy's hair matched fibers found in the pantyhose mask. The infamous bite mark left on Lisa Levy was also compelling evidence against the killer. "I think the bite mark itself indicates a primary rage in which presumably Mr. Bundy was when he committed these murders," Simpson said. "It was just sheer murderous rage." Bundy was charged with the murders and assaults at the Florida State University dormitory. The trial was covered by over 250 journalists from all 5 continents. It was also the first trial televised nationwide in the USA. Despite the court appointing him 5 attorneys, Bundy suddenly insisted on representing himself. The prosecution attempted to reach a plea agreement with Bundy. In exchange for confessing to the murders of Levy, Bowman, and Leach, they offered a 75-year sentence instead of the death penalty. The prosecution agreed to this because the prospects of losing the case for them were quite large. For Bundy, it was not only a way to avoid the death penalty, but also a tactical move. He would agree to the deal, and over time, evidence could be lost or tampered with, witnesses could die, move away, or retract their statements. In that case, the case against him would be impossible to reconstruct, and he could petition to have the agreement overturned and secure himself an acquittal. However, at the last minute, Bundy refused this offer. During the trial, Bundy behaved extremely arrogantly, argued with the judges, and sought to demonstrate his intellectual superiority. He was not bothered by the fact that his audacious antics worked against him. His words could be used by the prosecution, and, in a sense, he was digging his own grave. Such antics, like refusing to enter into a plea deal with the prosecution and insisting on representing himself in court, may seem very strange and foolish. All this leads us to the main question: why did Bundy do all this? Did he not realize how it could all turn against him? Some might think Bundy was simply stupid, but that's unlikely, as we know his IQ was 136. Perhaps he wanted to deprive himself of life as punishment for his crimes. But no, Bundy delayed his execution for many years with various appeals to officials. Also, in his final interview, he tried to manipulate the emotions of viewers, saying that his death would not ease the suffering of the victims' families. To truly understand the reason for his strange behavior, we will have to delve into the philosophy of thinking of people suffering from psychopathy. Extreme egocentrism, narcissism, inflated self-esteem, pretentiousness of judgments, pretense of knowing the truth in the final instance. Against the background that the overwhelming majority of psychopaths are unable to obtain a systematic education or cannot realize themselves on a professional level, their excessively inflated self-esteem makes a repellent impression on everyone capable of an objective assessment. Inflated self-esteem often plays a bad joke with psychopathic criminals. They, being accused of committing criminal offenses, refuse the services of a professional lawyer and try to defend themselves in court, as a result of which they receive a heavier sentence than originally planned by the prosecution. Megalomania, the need for recognition of their unusual qualities, knowledge, merits, etc. It is precisely the desire to achieve recognition of their own extraordinariness that pushes some serial killers to quite unexpected and difficult-to-explain actions, such as writing letters detailing the crimes committed, making phone calls, etc. It is known that the notorious Jack the Ripper, one of the first serial killers, wrote a letter in which he enclosed a part of a kidney extracted from the body of a woman he had killed. It is megalomania that fuels the tendency to self-incrimination demonstrated by some psychopaths. A classic example of such a fantasist liar is the American serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, who claimed to have killed more than 600 people. However, careful investigation spanning many years showed that Lucas did not commit the crimes he attributed to himself. Irresponsibility. Even in cases of obvious guilt, a psychopath never admits responsibility for what he has done. An exception may be a situation in which admitting guilt allows one to gain some dividends, for example, sympathy, or indulgence. A psychopath always justifies himself in everything. If he is found guilty of rape, he will claim that the victim provoked him. If his guilt in murder is proven, he will assert that he was cruelly offended. An example of such total self-justification can be seen in the story of the American prostitute killer Arthur Shawcross, who claimed that he killed those women who laughed at his small penis. From his point of view, this was a sufficient justification for murder. Superficial knowledge and reasoning, inability and unwillingness to learn, laziness, the need for fresh impressions. Psychopaths have quick minds and good memories, but systematic learning does not appeal to them. They usually perform poorly in school, and only a few of them are capable of obtaining higher education. In their understanding, life should be a kaleidoscope of pleasant and entertaining experiences, and when they do not get what they want, they quickly become disillusioned. Hard work, focus, and exertion only irritate them. An illustrative example is as follows. In police practice in the West, the following technique is often used to engage a suspect. They are given a notepad and pencil and asked to write about their life. Psychopaths actively start writing but quickly lose interest because writing a large volume of logically connected text is quite challenging. Such work requires mental concentration, analysis, and certain exertion of strength and time. Psychopaths are incapable of sustained exertion, even mental. Carl Panzram, who wrote a fairly detailed manuscript about himself, is one of the few exceptions to this rule. To list all serial and mass murderers who have written more or less coherent literary works, you would need the fingers of one hand, and this is out of more than 2,000 criminals of this category who have become known in the last century and a half. Interestingly, even the most intellectual of serial killers, Ted Bundy and Edmund Kemper, although willingly gave interviews, never managed to write anything during their many years in custody. Shallowness of emotions. Psychopaths are little interested in others, only their own experiences, and needs are at the center of their world, so they usually only mimic the emotions that govern our behavior: attention, interest, sympathy, compassion. Extreme deceitfulness, dishonesty, propensity for betrayal. These qualities are a result of the extreme egocentricity of psychopaths and sociopaths who always seek to act to their own advantage. They often flaunt their selfishness, and to those who are not familiar with them, such straightforwardness may seem to give these people a special charm. But this deceptive misconception disappears instantly as soon as the psychopath is faced with a moral choice. Then their cynicism becomes frighteningly obvious. A psychopath does not respect others' interests, does not cherish others' feelings, and does not regret other people. The inability and unwillingness to respect others' interests quickly creates psychological tension in the psychopath's communication with other people and automatically turns them into a weak link in any family, group, or community, even a criminal one. The desire to manipulate others. One could say that this trait is somewhat of a continuation of the previous point. Typically, psychopaths master the skill of recognizing the weaknesses of those close to them from an early age and use it to their advantage. Tendency towards lying, serial and mass murders as a criminal phenomenon, and pretense make it easier for them to achieve their narrow-minded goals. As they mature, manipulation skills are honed. Psychopaths actively use their sexual attractiveness to their advantage and seek to gain financially from their sexual partners. In addition to implicit manipulation, psychopaths are capable of crude pressure and blackmail. Moreover, many psychopaths resort to blackmail repeatedly throughout their lives, obtaining significant favors through intimidation. It would not be an exaggeration to say that psychopaths are natural manipulators of others. On July 24, 1979, what seemed to be a charming law student was convicted and sentenced to death for the murders of Bowman and Levy, as well as the attempted murder of Chandler, Kleiner, and Thomas. Ted Bundy's death was now legally guaranteed, and his execution was only a matter of time. In January 1980, Bundy appeared in court in Orlando, where he was convicted and sentenced to death for the kidnapping and murder of Kimberly Leach. The evidence presented in court included eyewitness testimonies, fibers, and hotel receipts from Lake City. Like many death row inmates across the United States, Ted Bundy spent years in prison before his inevitable execution. After 9 years in a Florida state prison, on January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy's death occurred when he was executed in the electric chair. Ted Bundy's death occurred after he exhausted his appeals, and final convictions convinced him to confess. Although he confessed to an astonishing 30 murders, experts still believe the number of victims was higher. On his last night alive, Bundy called his mother twice. As hundreds of people camped outside to drink beer anticipating the killer's death, it was time for his last meal. Seemingly unenthusiastic about the dinner, Bundy refused to choose anything and received the standard farcetique: eggs, hash browns, and toast. With nerves and anxiety presumably coursing through his body, he didn't even touch the food. Ted Bundy died hungry. In addition to the frenzied crowd outside, the main event in the Florida State Prison was almost equally attended. According to the La Times reporting from inside, 42 witnesses came to watch Ted Bundy's death around 7 a.m. on January 24, 1989. The Times covered the killer's last breaths and left behind a detailed account of Ted Bundy's death. Ted Bundy essentially represents the invisible psychopath. If not for a few mistakes caused by his bloody passions and a few lucky breaks by the law, Bundy might have continued to be a charming law student by day and a horror movie monster by night. In the end, his body was cremated and his ashes scattered in the Cascade Mountains of Washington as he requested. The Cascades are the same mountain range where Bundy disposed of at least 4 of his victims. Since then, Bundy has been a source of inspiration for countless horror films, true crime books, and documentaries. Decades later, humanity still collectively tries to understand how a seemingly normal, handsome man with a decent upbringing could be so cruel, horrifying, and indifferent.